Live from our Boston headquarters, this is Cybba on Display. In-depth conversations on marketing tips, trends, and strategies. Here's your host, Derek Sullivan.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Cybba on Display. I'm your host, Derek Sullivan. Joining me today is Rand Fishkin. Rand was the CEO and co-founder of SEO Moz, or what's now referred to as just Moz, which is huge in the SEO world. Right now, he's left to start a new venture called SparkToro, which is essentially this really cool online tool where you can punch in keywords and it scans a variety of social channels, websites, podcasts, whatever it may be, to show where your audience kind of aligns with the most. Within marketing, it's so competitive. Best way to really stand out is to know your audience, really define it. This is a great tool for it. And even better is your first 5 searches are absolutely free. So it's definitely worth checking out. Rand, what do you think? Was that a pretty decent elevator pitch?
Doesn't sound too bad. We bumped it up after the pandemic hit last year, and the first 10 searches every month are free. So yeah, anyone who wants to try it can give it a spin. And yeah, I've been doing SparkToro now for almost 3 years since I left Moz. And it's been an exciting journey. We launched last year in April of 2020, which I'm sure your listeners know, sort of the worst time to launch a new business in 100 years.
Right.
But nevertheless, after the first few months, it really picked up and things have been fairly good. I think for a lot of folks in the online world, they've sort of observed that, what economists call like the K-shaped recovery, right? That a lot of, e-commerce based businesses, a lot of information technology, a lot of marketing stuff, digital tech, all of that is going up and to the right, even as, the United States is sort of, what did Bloomberg call it today? Experiencing the largest rise in poverty levels in 50 years.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd love to know kind of what was the inspiration behind starting SparkToro. So I would imagine, obviously, it's a much different venture from what you were doing before with SEO Moz. So what kind of sparked this interest?
Yeah. So Moz was obviously in the SEO software space, but SparkToro is still in the web marketing world. So not a massive shift. I didn't get into dental equipment, but the idea behind SparkToro really came about because I was helping a lot of small businesses, new businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, folks who weren't necessarily massively sophisticated at marketing and also were struggling to get customers and build up SEO as a channel. And I think, look, SEO can be a great channel, right? Ranking in search engines organically, that's great. That traffic, if you can invest in it and earn sort of all the ranking signals that Google needs you to, it's still quite a good channel. I don't want to dismiss it, but it's gotten incredibly competitive the last 20 years. My first few years in SEO, you and I could start a new website tomorrow, and a month later we could be like number one for all these terms if we know what we were doing. Mm-hmm. That is not very possible today. So it's much more challenging. It's also the case that Google themselves have been competing more and more with publishers, right? Trying to take that traffic away. When you search Google now, so often, I'm sure your listeners will resonate with this, right? You hop on your phone, you hop on your laptop, whatever, you perform a search and Google gives you the answer, sort of scraped right from the website, right in the results. So you never need to click. And
right.
In fact, some of the research that I did when I started SparkToro was around analyzing clickstream data and showing that more than half of all Google searches result in 0 clicks. Nobody ever clicks to any website. So that's a huge change too.
Yeah, that's a big shift. Do you know what that used to look like? 50% is it's crazy.
So the company that I worked with, JumpShot, had data going back about 3 or 4 years, and it had basically dropped from in the low 60s to 49% on average. A big part of that was the rise of mobile devices too, because on our mobile devices we're even less likely to click than we are on desktop and laptop. But so, Derek, all these trends kind of combine to have me say like, gosh, I need to be able to help people do marketing in other places.
Right.
Like, how do you do marketing without just throwing money at Google and Facebook and letting them sort out all the targeting? Because it's pretty tough to figure out, where does my audience hang out? What podcasts do they listen to? What YouTube channels are they subscribing to? Which websites do they visit? What social accounts do they follow? What sources of press and media are they influenced by? What topics are resonating with them? You can run surveys, you can do interviews, but those are not great ways to do it. Like, if you really want to understand your target audience, the people who might become customers, the best possible way to do it is go to lockpicking school, right? Learn how to break into their house, grab their phone,
right? Get
the unlock code, and look at everything that they, browse and read and watch and follow and all that kind of stuff. And then do that 1,000 times for, a good sample set of your customers. This, of course, highly unethical, super illegal.
Might get in trouble.
And impractical. So
yeah. Don't recommend doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. You shouldn't do that. But so what Casey and I realized, my co-founder and I realized, is that this data not for everyone, certainly, but for a large number of people, is public on the web. Your Instagram account, your Twitter account, your Facebook page, if it's public, your LinkedIn page, your Reddit account, your YouTube account. If those things are public, and many people do, keep them entirely public, Google essentially crawls them, and, you can access all that data. If you visit my Twitter profile, you'll see who I follow. You'll see what I talk about. You'll see which hashtags I use. You'll see, you can click to my, website, which links to my LinkedIn. So then you can go to my LinkedIn and see everything I follow and talk about there. And if you do that at scale, which is what SparkToro does, we do that for about 75-ish million English language profiles across the web. If you do that at scale across enough networks, you can get a really good sample set of what anyone talks about. So, if you type in, my audience uses these words in their profile, I don't know, dentist or orthodontist or electrician or snowboarder or Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it is, right?
The fun one. Yeah.
You can find out information on what people who match those criteria, whatever criteria you've got, are talking about, what they're following, what they're reading, what they're paying attention to. And now I can really help people go find the places to do marketing.
So you're essentially giving the power back to the people, right?
The power back to the people. I mean,
we can go on a tangent there. Yeah. But seriously, you're allowing someone who may be marketing their business for the first time to really kind of have that control again, to find an audience on their own terms, with keywords that they want. Not only that, but I've been playing around with it for a little bit myself. It's a very easy to use platform, super user friendly. Do you find that, maybe there are some social networks that aren't as accurate at defining an audience as others?
I mean, definitely. So Facebook is one of the ones where the data that we get back from them is really mediocre. It's not to say we don't have some data, but what they show and what they'll let you crawl and index is kind of mediocre. Instagram's quite good. Twitter is excellent. A few others, places like we crawl GitHub and Quora. Okay. We're excited about a lot more from LinkedIn, which we're about to get a large amount more data from LinkedIn in the next couple of months. And then Reddit is actually quite promising. People, they don't necessarily aren't as public about like who they are. There's not as much identification information, but the data that is in Reddit about what people care about and follow and are interested in and talk about, that stuff is great. And there is quite an active community there. So yeah, it's, it varies from network to network.
Sure.
But there's plenty enough data that you can sort of think of this like election polling, right? Like, in any given election, your local election, whatever, I don't know, Seattle, King County, council member races, they run polls, and there's 500,000 people in Seattle. Sorry, maybe there's more like 800,000 people in Seattle now, but they'll survey 1,000. Right. And maybe the election polling is off by 1 or 2% or even 3% or something. Right. But you get pretty accurate data around that. SparkToro is sort of the same way. We're not going to have every single dentist in the United States.
Right.
But if you take a sample set of whatever, the 12,000 dentists we do have, most dentists are probably going to behave in very similar ways to the 12,000 that are in our database. And so you can get very indicative data about what they listen to and watch and read and follow and talk about and all those kinds of things.
Sure. It's a great general like overview of what this audience could look like, essentially. It just like summarizes it.
Yeah. And this, this type of research, if you wanted to do it before SparkToro, really surveys and interviews were kind of your primary tool, your exclusive tool, especially as a small business. And those are great. Like you can get a lot of interesting, I'd say, qualitative data from especially surveys, but asking people what podcasts they listen to just would not produce good stuff, as opposed to like, oh, you go to their Twitter account, you see it links to their LinkedIn, and that links to whatever their Apple account, and here's all the podcasts that they've
it's much more
connected with or followed or subscribed to, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Like that's actual data, as opposed to asking, like if you ask me what podcasts I listen to, I'll be like, oh, I don't know, I'll name top 2 or 3 that are sort of broad, as opposed to ones that are very specific to my interests. And
right, exactly. Not only that, but it's kind of like that that analogy where you do a mall poll, and people at the mall who do like surveys, you're only polling people who want to do those surveys in the first place, right?
Right.
So it's going to really vary with that person. But this is, you can really look at, a good amount of people and what they actually listen to, what they watch, what they follow, kind of break it down from there.
Yeah. I mean, the sampling bias that you get with SparkToro is people who have public profiles on the web. And that's definitely not going to be everyone in your audience.
Right.
And they'll certainly, people who have public profiles on the web are probably more active in their web activity than folks who don't.
Right.
But it's still a very reasonable proxy for a large percentage of your audience, especially as more and more of humanity is becoming very, very active on the web, especially the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying if someone had an Instagram profile, for instance, that was in private mode, you can't get as much information, or you can't get any information from them?
We wouldn't see anything.
Got it. I see. So it's anyone who's actually publicly active and can show everything off, essentially. So
and we don't have any personally identifiable information. So we wouldn't be like, oh, when you search for dentists or when you search for podcasters, right? We wouldn't show you, here's Derek Sullivan and like his data.
You're not going to dox me or anything. You're not going
to. We would tell you. We toss all that stuff anyway. We don't want names or addresses or phone numbers or any. We don't even do any demographics for this reason. So no race information or religion or sexual orientation or gender or age. None of that is in SparkToro. We are all about data that you can craft from people based on the words and phrases that you will find in their profile, or things they talk about, or sources that they follow and pay attention to.
Right.
As opposed to demographic stuff, which I feel like demographics is, 20th century marketing.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, for me to ask, because, when setting up a campaign, I feel like that's the default, right? Like people want to break down the demo, right? Like my audience is men and women, 18 to 35. You're saying that that's no longer necessary or even useful at this point. It's really about the interest. It's not about.
Yeah. I mean, unless you are a mass market consumer brand that has, really no niche at all. So for example, if you're Coca-Cola, sure, fine. 18 to 35 men and women, worldwide.
Yeah.
Fine. Whatever. We're not for you, Coca-Cola, unless, maybe Coke's doing a very specific campaign with a very niche group. But for example, you start making, I don't know, Bernie Sanders mittens in Vermont or whatever it is, right? And so now,
a smart idea. Good idea.
There's a lot of demand there.
Oh, there's a lot right now. Yeah.
And so now you go, oh, well, let me see if I can find people who follow Bernie Sanders's social accounts online, and let's see what else they pay attention to. And also, why don't I go ahead and follow, it's not going to be people who are into winter sports, but probably a lot of people who are following like outdoor activities. So maybe I'm going to look at Outside Online magazine and see what they follow and listen to and pay attention to, and what else or people who use the hashtag, winter hiking or something like that, right?
Sure.
So,
yeah.
okay, now I'm getting like my specific audience that cares about this topic, because I want to go after publications, people, sources of influence, podcasts, YouTube channels, etc., that audience pays attention to, rather than being so broad in my targeting that, whatever, 8 out of 10 people that I'm reaching with my campaign don't give a crap.
Right.
Like the Bernie Sanders mittens are not selling like hotcakes in Florida, but
Exactly,
your 18 to 35 demo
right. Yeah.
is going to capture a lot of those.
It's pretty broad, right? So it's essentially a great way to not waste ad budget, right? It's like being very mindful targeted of where your money's going.
Right. Well, and I think this is particularly important. Look, in terms of advertising, I think that a lot of brands with a lot of money are willing to throw a ton of that money away in order to get more awareness and breadth. But if you're a small business, a new entrepreneur, a startup, someone with a limited budget, someone who is not focused on growth over profitability, if you care about your return on investment from marketing dollars and time spent, you need to be very specific, right? You've got to go after audiences that are likely to be right customers for you. And so one of the best things that you can do is, have conversations with your existing customers, learn how they found out about you, learn what their interests are, learn what they pay attention to, and then go find more people like them on the web, and do your marketing in those places in ways that resonated with your existing customers.
Right.
If your customers are talking about your product in a certain way, you want to talk about your product that way to people like them, and you will get more customers like them.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of the times it's kind of guesswork in the beginning, right? You're not really sure where your product might resonate with or who it might resonate with, what that messaging is. But if you can see someone else kind of taking care of that for you, kind of build that lookalike audience off of it.
And a big problem right now, I'm sure you've seen this, Derek, too, right? Is that a ton of marketers, a ton of entrepreneurs, a ton of startups, they just throw money at Google and Facebook and let them sort out the targeting. And Google and Facebook's interest is completely misaligned with your interests, right? They are essentially looking to capture the most ad dollars possible. And since they are essentially a duopoly and know that you don't have a lot of choice in terms of where you can go spend your ad budget, they don't have to be great high ROI sources for you, right? They know that a ton of people out there will go spend whatever it is, $100 to acquire a new customer who brings them $104.
Right. Horrible.
Right. Yeah. So Google and Facebook essentially have built these massive businesses by squeezing the margin out of millions, tens of millions of small and medium businesses and big companies too. And that it's just not a recipe for a great relationship, right? So every year you can see Facebook pulling away ad targeting options, Google pulling away data that they used to show you about your ad campaigns. Just last September, Google took away like more than a quarter of all the keyword data that that they were providing in paid search. So now you can't see which words and phrases sent you traffic.
And why is that? Is it a legality thing? Or more like why?
Because the more they pull away, the harder it is for you to include negative keyword matches and make your campaign more targeted. Basically, it's harder for you to optimize your campaign, and therefore Google will make more money off of every single advertiser. And they can just do this ad nauseum, right? They can basically look at their numbers and be like, well, all right, let's pull away 5% more keyword data. And, that'll mean 7% more spend next quarter. So we can hit our Wall Street numbers.
Right. So it's essentially just an easier way for them to make more money.
Yeah. Very, very easy way for them to make more money at our expense.
Right.
And we don't have a lot of option because it's not like people are going to Bing and searching, right?
Yeah, or Ask Jeeves, if that's even a thing
Ask
anymore.
Jeeves.
Yeah. Oh, no, rest in peace, right? So with these trends kind of being taking place in the past few years, do you think that modern marketers are kind of waking up to this and realizing that, hey, these aren't the best options for me, and finding new ways to really define their audience? I mean, do you think you'll start seeing this trend where people pull away some of their Facebook and Google dollars?
I actually suspect that is not going to happen en masse. My guess is that a small, limited number of sort of the smartest, savviest, most cost and ROI focused marketers and entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs and boardrooms, they will do that, but the vast majority of folks will not. And that is because for most businesses, marketing is not where they look for their competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. They're trying to do it in, product or in brand or customer service or some other area of the business, finance, whatever it is. And so essentially they're willing to overspend and poorly spend on marketing because of a combination of, I don't care that much, it's not core to my business, I'm doing good enough with marketing, or I don't understand marketing all that well, I'm not passionate about it, I'm not willing to make the investment, whatever. For all these reasons, marketing is not cutting edge in most organizations. And in a little bit of a way, this is a really good thing for anyone who's listening, because if everyone were doing it, it would be hyper competitive and really difficult. But because only a small portion are savvy enough to try to be more cutting edge with their marketing, you can make small investments in your marketing targeting, in how you switch up your marketing, and get a real advantage over your competition.
SparkToro is fairly new, like you said. Started it right at the beginning of quarantine, which I'm sure was very difficult. It's just you and one partner, correct? It's just you and one?
Just Casey and I. So I'm basically, customer support and marketing and CEO and all that. And Casey takes care of all the technology. We have a few contractors, which has been great. We work with some agencies as well, which is also great. So.
Do you like being hands-on? I would imagine that, like you said, you're handling so many day-to-day things. Is that really what motivates you? Is that really where your passion lies, is to, start kind of from the ground up and really build something?
I definitely like some aspects of it, and I find some aspects of it quite challenging. I mean, it's a really high risk thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like most startups fail. It is technology startups in particular. I think the average 5-year survival rate is 15%.
Wow.
So it is really small, much lower than like, a services business, a consultancy or an agency, for example, are like in the 60, 65%. That being said, I bet it's not as bad as tech startups.
Right. Yeah.
This world is very, very risky. So, when we started SparkToro, I left Moz, basically started SparkToro the next day, spent the first few months kind of building up the idea and the product plan, recruiting Casey, and then we raised a round of funding in June of 2018. Mm-hmm. And that basically gave us 18 months to like go build our product, test it with a bunch of people. We had a very robust beta testing, couple of rounds of that in 2019, and then launched in early 2020.
Right.
But I would say it was a fun experience. It was so different from Moz, right? Where it was like, okay, I have an executive assistant and I have meetings all day and, big team and tons of people. What's crazy is with the two of us, we are often getting a lot more done in a week than what I could get done in Moz in a quarter.
And why is that, you think? Because you have so much control, or you're so hands-on yourself that you can just write the schedule and be like, I'm just going to bang out this to-do list?
Yeah, and there's no communication, right? Required. Right. There's no politics. You don't have to get anybody on board. There's no sort of heavy processes to run through. No approvals.
No sign-offs.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And of course, it's also true that we don't have, Moz had 30,000 paying customers. Mm-hmm. SparkToro miraculously has been very, very consistent. But if we go down for a night or we make a mistake or it doesn't matter all that much, right? It's not hugely meaningful.
Sure.
If I send the wrong email or we forget to test something, It's not a big deal. Last night
Right.
we sent an email announcing a new product feature, and Casey and I were talking this morning, and we're like, shoot, we should have we should have done the thing where you A/B test the email subject line, because that like predicts your open rate and click through rate so highly, and we're like, shoot, forgot. All right, next time.
Yeah, it kind of takes the
at Moz,
pressure
that
off.
would have been like that wouldn't have happened, right? You go through a process. There's like people on the marketing team, and there's the CMO who reviews it, and there's the email marketer who reviews it, and
Right. Yeah. A lot of sign-offs. Any big 2021 plans to kind of grow, maybe like bring in new employees, or are you still just kind of feeling it out right now?
My suspicion is that for 2021, we will probably keep relying on a lot of contractors and agencies. I love doing that. I don't know why in tech startup world it is so recommended against by whatever investors and sort of the culture of tech world. Like, don't if you want to do something right, you've got to hire in-house and like build up that muscle. I completely disagree. We have used agencies for everything from conversion rate optimization to putting together our email onboarding sequence to our beta testing run through. We had an art director and a designer who were contract. All of our finance stuff is contract. It's great.
Right.
It's fantastic, right? These people, like their incentives are super aligned with ours, and their time, the time that they spend doing the work that we need is so much less than an in-house person that it just makes tons of sense. Plus in the United States, I recognize this isn't true for everybody, but in the United States, you're, as an employer, especially a small employer, the cost of healthcare is so massive that essentially agencies and consultants become a much better financial deal.
Absolutely. Especially able to outsource a lot of that stuff. I mean, it just takes a lot of huge projects off your plate, right?
Absolutely.
So how did you kind of develop this passion? What got you into the world of marketing to kind of take you down this road?
To be honest, it was Moz, right? So I dropped out of college in 2001 and started doing web design and development, working for my mom's, one-woman consultancy here in Seattle. And then we essentially were co-founders on Moz. I started the blog that became this SEO consulting company, and then a software company later. And so all of my experiences at that one company, I was there. I was at the company that became Moz for 17 years, basically my entire adult life post college until I started SparkToro. So I have a very limited set of experiences in terms of companies. I'm kind of glad that I got to do SparkToro as well. And even though I'd love to have said, that my career was sort of started Moz, built it to something huge, whatever, had a great exit, made my investors happy. That would have been a great story, but I think that the way it worked out is a decent match. I have a lot of regrets, but it's a decent match for learning a ton and becoming a more thoughtful person, a more thoughtful marketer, a more thoughtful entrepreneur.
Sure.
One of the pieces of advice that I had in my book in Lost and Founder was like, if I could go back and do it again, I wish I had been able to work at 2 or 3 startups before I started my own.
Right.
Like, I think I really messed up by trying to do everything for the first time and like learn it, as opposed to observing other people and being part of a team and seeing what I liked and didn't like. I want to think that I would have made better, smarter, more thoughtful decisions all along my ramp, as CEO at Moz.
Sure.
I don't know, maybe.
What were some of those growing pains? You said that, I don't know, I don't want to call them mistakes necessarily, because obviously you learn from them, right? But like, what are some of those like huge, mistakes that you've made?
Yeah, but no. Lost and Founder is basically a book of just giant mistakes that I wish I could change, and the stories behind them and what happened. So yeah, I think my whole career is just a series of, well, I messed that up. What would I do differently?
Right. Yeah.
but some of the big ones are in terms of, so one of the ones we talked about is a huge one. There was a huge part of me that believed that my prestige as a company, as a founder, as a CEO was tied to how many people worked for me.
Okay.
The bigger my team, the more impressive my company looked. The more, people admired and respected me, the more highly Moz was sort of thought of, not by its customers, but in like the ecosystem of tech and startups and venture and all of that kind of stuff, right? The more impressive an entrepreneur I was in like whatever, the Seattle startup scene. What a terrible thing to optimize for. Prestige.
Right.
Terrible, terrible thing to optimize for. And it took a long time for me to recognize that was a prideful, self-serving, and did not serve our customers well, did not serve our employees well, for sure, didn't serve our team well, didn't make Moz a better place to work, or didn't make our product better, didn't make us a more impressive company. But it was something I felt like I was supposed to be doing, like always hiring and growing the team and, keep the profits low, but maybe the growth rate high, those kinds of things. That was definitely a big mistake. I think another one was we raised 2 rounds of funding while I was CEO. One was the 1.1 million in 2007 that kind of kicked off Moz as a software business. And the second one was an $18 million round in 2012. And I think that was a mistake as well, mostly because I wanted more prestige for the business. I wanted to show that like we were playing among the big boys. I wanted to be a unicorn, someday, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Again, huge mistake. Just totally took me off track in a million different ways. Everything from like, I probably spent 30% of my time between 2009 and 2012 fundraising in one capacity or another.
I see. So you just prioritize something that, looking back, should not have necessarily.
I think almost all of those $18 million were wasted. Which is wild, right?
Why is that necessarily a bad thing? Like, other than, you said you wasted some of that money, but why is prioritizing fundraising for the company a bad thing? Or was it a bad thing?
So I think there's 2 angles to it, right? One is the prioritization of fundraising means that you are often optimizing for metrics that investors care about versus ones that customers, market, employees care about, and things that are good for those people. And my philosophy is I do not find it rewarding, interesting, useful, or productive for an individual, for a company, or for society to try and make very wealthy people much wealthier.
Right.
Like they're going to be fine. They're doing great. I don't care about them. Right.
Like, sure.
No offense to millionaires and billionaires. Well, maybe some offense, but I just optimizing for their returns is orthogonal to producing a great product, to delighting customers, to treating your employees and team well, to being respectful to yourself, to being good to your family and friends, to building a rich life outside of just work. It has a very directly negative impact on all those things. I think virtually everyone in the startup world would attest to that. And they'd also, even those who are like fully bought in, would say, well, none of that stuff really matters. Being a $1 billion unicorn and like growing my, revenue or user base year over year, that's what matters to me. That's how I take pride in myself, right? That's what I'm optimizing for. Hey, if that's you and that's your philosophy, you go for it.
Right.
I think a lot of people who get into that world are sort of slowly frog boiling in the water. And then they find themselves in that ecosystem and are optimizing for all sorts of the wrong things and realizing that maybe their life and their company and their business and their team and customers are not as happy as they could have been. So I think there's that aspect. And then there's the very direct one, which is just that when you are using your time to fundraise. You are not using your time to do other things for your business.
Right.
So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that combination really, really turned me off. And look, I talked about this a bunch in the book. With there are advantages to venture. There are certainly businesses that could not have been built without that type of investment capital, and also, I don't think we want more of those businesses.
Right.
In my opinion, I don't want a bunch of monopolies and duopolies that are super powerful and controlling their markets. I want lots and lots of small and medium businesses, lots of competition in a marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great predictors of more income equality. Those are great predictors of more opportunity for more entrepreneurs and more small investors. There are opportunities for more employment. You get a Google and so much of the market opportunity is gone versus if we imagine a world where Ask Jeeves was still around, right? And Microsoft Search was still, a big player, and Yahoo and like a bunch of these. The innovation that happened during those first 10, 12 years of the search market heating up, Google, think of Google Maps alone. What an incredible innovation that was.
Yeah.
Just massive. And Google made that investment because they had to compete with Yahoo and Microsoft and Ask and all these other players. And they were like, oh, we got to get there first. It's fascinating to me to imagine a world like that instead of a world where Google can basically just be dominant. And their innovation now is, hey, should we pull 5% more data from keyword advertisers? Yeah, let's do it. Screw them.
Right, exactly. Right. It starts to become a little evil.
Yeah, ugh.
Yeah.
One of the last huge innovations that Google had that I loved was Project Fi, right? The Google Fi phones.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, right? Basically just huge innovation on top of mobile phone service. I still think it's one of the best services out there compared to Verizon or AT&T or any of these other players.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened in the last 5-6 years? Google's just become this super comfortable monopoly, and they pulled back on all these cool, interesting, moonshot efforts.
Right. So it kind of limits their innovation as well. Right.
You can be lazy because you're big.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It makes everything boring for everyone else.
Yep. And essentially, a ton of Google's innovation has been around I don't know if you've seen for your listeners, this is probably very, very important, but most of us don't think about it a ton. But in the advertising world, right, how you go to Zappos.com and you click on some shoes and you're like, ooh, those Adidas trainers, those are amazing. I want to get those. $180. Ooh, that's too pricey. And then you leave. And what happens? You visit a bunch of other websites, mm-hmm. and those shoes follow you around the internet like a lost puppy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that happens because of third-party cookies, right? So mm-hmm. the cookie gets dropped on your browser, and then it gets picked up. Google powers a ton of those. Facebook Display powers some of them. A bunch of other ad networks out there power some of them. And so Google has this proposal that third-party cookies violate your privacy, which, let's be realistic, tons of things violate your privacy. The question is whether it's useful to you. Right. And Google is essentially, their big innovation that they announced a couple of days ago is they've got this new thing called Flock, federated lists of cohorts, something like that. And the idea is that they will get rid of cookies in your, third-party cookies in your browser. And now you can just, they'll anonymize your information based on your use of Chrome or Firefox or whatever, and put you in a group, and then people can target you, advertisers can target you through that group. So It's not direct one-to-one privacy violation. What does it mean though?
Yeah.
It means Google will be the only place any advertiser can ever go to reach anyone.
Right.
Because they own the Flock. It's just a monopoly move, right? It's just a protect the monopoly move, which is where a ton of their innovation goes now, to just building walled gardens to prevent anyone from
zero competition.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to see a lot more, I would say information that being spread. I wouldn't say it's a secret, but I just feel like it's not common public knowledge, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks like see Google making these moves and are like, oh, okay, they're doing that. Why are they doing that? Oh, they say they're doing it for privacy. Okay, it's a privacy thing.
They don't question it.
It's not a privacy thing. Like, come on.
Right, yeah.
Google has never cared about your privacy. Facebook has never cared about your privacy. When they make these moves, the moves are designed to either be, primarily a public relations, like, hey, let's prevent a PR disaster like Cambridge Analytica or something.
Right.
And while we're doing that, how do we do it in such a way that protects our monopoly power?
Right. It's almost like giving the people like false security.
Zappos following you around the web with your shoes. It's not violent. Like it technically violates your privacy. And what did you lose from it? I don't think we lost anything. I don't think most people care. Like,
no, sometimes I like seeing those shoes follow me around.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Me too.
Yeah.
And you can turn on ad blockers if you care, right? Like ad blockers are a really good proxy for who actually cares about advertising infringing on their privacy.
Right.
When Google, they if they really wanted to protect your privacy, they'd just say, oh, here's an ad blocker in Chrome. Here's a third-party blocker in Chrome. You won't see this stuff, as opposed to, hey, here's how we're going to control all online advertising from here on out.
What are some, I guess, very tangible, easy moves people can make, maybe with like a lower budget, to really kind of get their feet, kind of get off the ground in marketing, right? What are some like early smart moves you can make so you're not wasting those ad dollars, and just being really mindful with your budget?
Yeah. So I highly, highly recommend two things. Before you launch your business or your product, you build your audience.
Okay.
Right. And you build that audience through doing interesting, unique things that your audience cares about, that they want to pay attention to, that are different from what else they can find in the market. And you do it on a platform you own and control, and you use the other platforms that exist to drive people to you. For example, you might say, I'm going to start a podcast about dental equipment, or about new electrical gear, or about my Dungeons and Dragons, models.
I gotta do a quick time here. Did you have a dentist appointment recently? I feel like you've talked about.
My dentist has been emailing me a lot.
Okay.
And they're sending like these passive aggressive messages about how bad my teeth are getting because we're in quarantine and I'm not going to the dentist.
Right.
So, but I also know their business is probably suffering, right? Because
because of course,
a lot of places you can go to, you can wear your mask. You can't go to the dentist and wear your mask. And so I've been like, I'll just wait until I get the vaccine.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry. It's funny. I'm like, all right, either he has an appointment coming up but I'm glad we got to the bottom of it.
We could completely pivot. We could say like, maybe you've made a new lighting design software for interior decorators, right? Okay. And so like they can, use your 3D modeling tool to like see how lights look in rooms and whatever, all these event spaces and fancy rich people and people who are building offices, they're all looking at, potentially your solution. Mm-hmm. Cool. Great. So you need to reach these interior designers. So I would urge you to have lots of conversations with those people who are in your network and to build up that network first. Mm-hmm. And then find things that are interesting and unique to them, problems that are not well discussed. Maybe you can collect and aggregate information about them and share that out. Maybe you can have a free tool that you provide. Maybe you have a blog that people want to subscribe to. Maybe you have a podcast where you interview, a bunch of the influential people in that field. Maybe you've got a YouTube channel. Maybe you've got a TikTok or whatever. It could be any of these, whichever ones fit your passion and your interest and provide unique value. You do something like that before you launch your product, and now you've acquired an audience who knows you, likes you, trusts you, cares about you, and then you've built something for them. Now you are much more likely to earn amplification and awareness, market knowledge, branding, than if you had merely put your head down for 18 months and built a product and pushed it out and said, okay, we made something. Where are you?
You got to put in a lot of in-person work, organic work, having those conversations, which by the way,
it can be a really, and the number of channels and opportunities is limitless, right? If maybe you say, I'm not good at any of those things. Well, what are you good at? Well, I like doing events. I'm good at networking. I'm good at speaking. Great. Event marketing can be perfect for you. And there's plenty of webinars and digital events that are happening during quarantine. And, 6 to 9 months from now, events business is likely to return. It'll probably have a pretty good decade ahead of it once these vaccines hit. That is a great way to invest. Maybe you say, I'm really, I'm not passionate about any of those, but I do like email newsletters. I could put together a great email newsletter. Perfect. Wonderful. I love email newsletters. I think that's a phenomenal way to attract an audience and build it up over time. And if you keep making your email newsletter better and better and getting more subscribers, when you launch your product, you are going to have a market of people who are not just right potential customers. They are people who can help amplify your brand and what you're doing. And so much of marketing is word of mouth. It happens behind the scenes. It's people who get together and are like, hey, have you seen SparkToro? Yeah, that's pretty cool. I really like what they're building. Da, 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 da. And then that, you don't see it. You can't quite feel, but you can see the rise of more people searching for your brand and product, and more people trying your product, and more people subscribing. We certainly do that, right? We see a ton of that where whatever, like I'm on your podcast, and then like a few weeks from now after it comes out, there's like people who have maybe listened to this podcast and SparkToro. Maybe they tried it, it wasn't quite right for them, but they mention it to their marketing agency and their agency signs up, or that kind of thing. I'm recommending that you do amplification, that you use all these channels and opportunities to do amplification for your messaging and your brand. So, before you launch, as you launch, after you launch, you should be definitely using whichever channels are your customers and their audience pay attention to, whether that's, Facebook or Reddit or Twitter or LinkedIn or YouTube or podcasts or, radio, television, print media. Maybe you have, very old school clients, events and networking, whatever it is, you should be using those channels to drive people back to your website and your email list. Right. And the reason it should always be those two is because you own and control them.
Yeah.
If you start building up, if you make your primary marketing channel, your Twitter account or your Instagram account, which a lot of small businesses unfortunately do, or your Google Maps page, that is a terrible, terrible idea, because Google Maps owns and controls your presence, and they can change it up in whatever way, and your visibility can drop 90% overnight.
Right.
A lot of us in marketing probably remember 7 years ago when we were complaining about how Facebook dropped organic page reach from like 15% to 2%.
Okay.
Today, organic page reach on average on a Facebook page is 0.09%.
Wow.
And we don't really complain because we're like, yeah, Facebook, they're just going to screw us, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've gotten used to it. But if you spent years building up your Facebook audience, it's pretty useless to you today. Like, you have to pay to reach them. Oops.
So going back, that's definitely something that I see. It's a common trend. I think small companies that are very product focused will really put a lot of time and effort into their Instagram page, right? It's a great visual representation of the company, but you're saying that shouldn't be the top priority, right? Email and website, that's what you own.
Yeah. So the Instagram average page reach, I think, is a little over 2%, like 2.1, 2.2%. That's the highest of all the social networks on average. Some businesses are seeing as high as 10, 11, 15%, right?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So, I have 1,000 subscribers and 120 of them see my, Instagram post when I put the post up.
Right.
Whoop-de-doo.
Right,
I'm sorry, my friend. I would much rather get 2 email subscribers than 1,000 more Instagram fans, because email open rates are 22% on average, and they have been for 20 years.
Right.
So if over the course of the next 6 months, you're sending out 5 emails, you are going to be in that person's inbox. You are going to earn their attention. You're very likely to get a click through. Assuming you do good email, that channel is just so powerful. Same thing with a website visit, right? You own and control the experience. You own and control the branding and marketing. Instagram is working to benefit Facebook.
Yeah.
Your email list is working to benefit you.
Anything you want to leave our viewers with, or I'm sorry, not viewers, well, viewers and our audience with? Any last words, shout outs, plugs you want to do?
Oh gosh, so many great opportunities. Let's see. I would say if you are, Derek, thinking about who your next guest should be, and you all are thinking about what book should I read so that I can do a great job with marketing. If you are at all considering content marketing, I recommend Melanie Deziel's Content Fuel Framework. Great short read. You can read it in probably 2 hours. And if you start putting it into action, her tactics are just amazing. And I'm happy to make an intro if you want to have her on the podcast. She's great.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And I'll be sure to link that in our caption below as well.
Sweet.
Rand, I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, Derek, I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
For more episodes, including our webinar replays, please visit our Spotify and Apple Music pages. Thanks.